Do we have any idea of how these tariffs are going to impact those layers of business differently?
I would say anyone with less access to capital and to loans is going to be impacted differently, which is the small businesses.
Okay, so let's say that the small businesses in the United States can't pay for the coffee as it comes into
Mhm.
the country. What happens to it?
It sits at ports. If they can't pay the duties, it sits at ports. They can return
Yep, the
it.
business goes out of business. Let's
Right.
say the business goes out of business. What happens to that coffee as it's at port?
It's in Ross at the port. It can go to it's known as general order, and eventually it would be seized and forfeited to the government, and they can sell it at auction, but it might have gone bad by that time.
If you're starting or growing your business in these volatile times in coffee and you need a little extra support, our scope of business advisory services may be just what you need. Join one of our hugely successful mastermind groups for support in a group setting, or send us an email to discuss our one-on-one consulting and business advisory services, where we'll work with you one-on-one to solve specific problems in your coffee business. All our services come with a 100% money-back guarantee, so send us an email at support@mapitforward.org and let us know how we can help you today. Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 2 of a 5-part series with Mollie Sitkowski. We are talking about understanding the impact of the Trump tariffs on the global coffee industry. In the last episode, we talked about what they are and how, in general, they're going to apply to the coffee supply chain and the coffee value chain. Now what we're going to talk about is what are the implications of these tariffs on small, medium and large businesses within the United States. So Mollie, what are the implications? And I guess the first place I'd like to start is with one specific question. Who pays the tariffs?
Oh, I love this question. I wanted to have an Instagram or a Facebook, or even on my LinkedIn, have my 9-year-old daughter be like, open an Amazon box and be like, I am a US consumer and I purchased from Amazon and I am paying part of the tariff because the person who sent me this from Amazon is paying the tariff. The US importer of
Mm.
record is paying the tariff. Now, depending on the Incoterms or contractual terms, it could be a foreign company who is the importer of record. But I would
Mhm.
say 90% of our clients here are US companies, and they are paying the tariffs to the US government, to Customs and Border Protection, which is one of the oldest agencies in the United States and has been collecting tariffs since around 1789. Not the External Revenue Service, and they are one of the oldest agencies in the United States.
So customs is a tax it's a tax, right? Like this
Mhm.
tariff should be seen as a tax, right?
It
So
is a tax.
customs is acting as a tax collection agency for the government through this
Yeah, it was part of the
program.
Department of Treasury until 2003.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's play this out
Mhm.
using green coffee.
Mhm.
Company A
Mhm.
in Guatemala
Mhm.
sends exports a container of coffee from Guatemala, sends it to a coffee roaster in California. And the coffee roaster is the company that bought it directly from that exporting company.
Mhm.
The coffee roasting company, Company B in California, they pay 10% at this point on top of what price?
On top of the price that they purchased it
The
from.
FOB price?
Right, the FOB price, yeah.
Okay. So they have to have that money they pay customs and then that gets released to them?
Yeah, they pay it at the time of entry. Customs will not give you your goods unless you pay them your duties. Although you can sign up for like a wire transfer per month kind of thing, but you have to have a customs bond and a whole bunch of things, and and if you don't pay your duties that month, then you get put on a bad import list.
Okay, so this is really important for people to know. and for all of us to understand, because I know that you have been keeping up with what's going on with the price of coffee, and how volatile that is at the moment. But also our industry is really under a lot of strain with regards to access to capital and to credit, and a lot of people are really living on the edge as business owners, small, medium, and large. 10% on top of a container that's worth $100,000 is $10,000 that they have to come up with out of thin air.
Mhm.
And they're not going to see that. That's going to contribute to their business in no way. They're not increasing the value of anything.
Mhm.
And they have to come up with that immediately. I'm understanding that correctly, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And how likely is this to stay as it is?
So
It's a loaded question, I know.
Yeah.
But I'm being intentional about what it being a loaded question.
So my thought, on the campaign trail, Trump said he wanted tariffs on everyone between 10 and 20%.
Mm,
We have tariffs of 10% on everyone. This
right.
pause is 90 days, but if you look in all of the implementation of this 90-day pause, there is no end date. So it could
Right.
Trump could get his wins. It could be a European agreement to increase NATO funds. It could be an agreement by that penguin island to give us penguin eggs. You know, who cares?
That is fantastic. As an Australian, I want to vouch for the penguins, and say that our penguins are not supernatural penguins. They don't actually trade with the United States. But in all fairness, I don't throw Trump many lifelines. But what I do want to say is, and help us all understand this. It sounds like the reason that they included the Penguin Islands is in case people want to use it as a. No, she's shaking her head. No, Lee, there's no fucking reason to include the Penguin
No,
Islands.
we have a rule of origin that prohibits transshipment. So
Okay.
unless the
I
penguins
was being generous.
are assembling machines, no.
Okay. All right. So then help me understand how this is. Actually, one question I really want to ask you. Why is he doing this to his people? Like, what's the end game here? Because Japan just walked away, like a couple of hours ago, I believe. Japan just walked away from negotiate. It may have happened yesterday, and I just found out about it. But Japan just left and said no, there's no deal. So, like, if what you say is what's playing out, where he's trying to organize deals with people, and they're turning around and saying no, we're not going to do this. What's the end game for the American business owner here?
So we can approach it one of two ways, which are both reasons that the administration has given. And we can take both of them as legitimate reasons.
Okay.
Both of them are like you can't have both, but we're going to pretend you can. So one of them is to increase
I'd love to see you and Trump at dinner.
One of them is to bring back U.S. manufacturing. And so if you increase the cost of imported goods, then the cost of U.S. goods becomes more palatable, right?
Okay.
So that would then mean that our U.S. manufactured goods, our labor is more expensive, et cetera. So then the fact that everyone else has cheaper labor, okay. That takes time. That also takes U.S., you have to import parts and components for manufacturing. You have to import capital equipment for manufacturing. So if that was a stated goal, then you would allow exclusions for parts and components. You would allow exclusions for capital equipment. You would allow foreign trade zone exceptions that don't exist under these tariffs, but exist normally. You would allow drawback for manufacturing, which doesn't exist. So that doesn't seem, and you would allow time for people to move manufacturing. So if that's a
Okay.
goal, then that is the way that I would approach it if I were going to have tariffs against countries. If you are concerned about trade deficits and people being unfair to our imports, then you approach it with deals. So that seems more like what this is. And that seems like more what the negotiations are.
Okay. But in the meantime, and this comes back to what he's doing to small businesses. Most businesses are not going to be able to survive either of those negotiations, the time that's required for that. So one could be forgiven for wondering if this is an effort to stomp out small business. Because it's certainly going to... Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think anyone has thought through that consequence. There's a lot of unintended consequences of these tariffs, and that certainly is definitely an unintended consequence. The farmers during the last Trump tariff, he had to give them a bunch of money, hoping that small businesses receive the same relief. If this is an unintended consequence that happens, then hopefully they will get the same relief that the farmers did.
I mean, lucky inflation's not an issue because giving people a fuck ton of money is not going to create any more problems, is it?
That's why we have to.
We just print it again.
Right.
And it's not going to have any other unintended consequences.
No.
Folks, I'm Australian and we do a lot of sarcasm. For those who couldn't detect that, that was sarcasm in action. Just to be very clear. Okay, so Mollie, when it comes to small, medium and large businesses, who do we think is going to be impacted the most when it comes to coffee being imported into the United States? Do we have any idea of how these tariffs are going to impact those layers of business differently?
I would say anyone with less access to capital and to loans is going to be impacted differently, which is the small businesses.
Okay, so let's say that the small businesses in the United States can't pay for the coffee as it comes into the country. What happens to it?
It sits at ports. If they can't pay the duties, it sits at ports. They can return it.
The business goes out of business. Let's say the business goes out of business. What happens to that coffee as it's at port?
It's in rots at the port. It can go to it's known as general order, and eventually it would be seized and forfeited to the government, and they can sell it at auction, but it might have gone bad by that time.
Okay. Can't see anything that could go wrong with this process. This is all being clearly thought out very well. And with regards to these businesses in the United States, both small, medium and large, a lot of the questions that we're getting is, but we can't grow coffee here. So why aren't these tariffs being why isn't coffee exempt from this?
Yeah.
Okay. Fine. That's the answer to the question. I love it. Okay.
I props to the first
your answers. Okay. So this brings me to lobbying. How does one go about, if you're a business in the United States, how does one go about actually having a conversation with people at the administration and saying, hey guys, if any of you drink coffee, this is going to be a problem if you don't want to spend $15 a cup for a cup of coffee?
So if you are a large business, you have an advantage because you probably have a lobbying firm who can get you access. If you're a small and medium business, you need to be contacting your Republican House members and your Senate members to tell them what an impact it has on you, because it is that they who need to be putting pressure on the administration, who need to be putting pressure on Trump to understand that these tariffs have a lot of unintended consequences. The Republicans have not really pushed back so far, at least publicly, on Trump against these tariffs. But if a lot of their constituents are pushing back on him, hopefully they will start as well.
Okay. And so I know right now there seems to be a lot of like deal making
Hmm.
in this process, and we're trying to ride out that process in the hopes that small, medium, and large businesses survive. But if this goes long term, and I'm gathering from what you're saying, the 10% tariffs are probably going to be here to stay long term. Um, what do we see as the economic impact of that for what? I don't know if this is something you feel comfortable speaking to, but is there an idea of what the economic impact is going to be for business owners in the United States of these 10% tariffs?
I mean, increased cost to consumers. There's no other way, right? If you have margins that can't have a 10% increase, then you need to increase your costs to consumers, your prices that you're charging.
Yeah, I I see I see that larger businesses are going to be able for some period of time to be
Hmm.
able to absorb some of these costs. They have at least a slightly longer runway than the medium and the smaller businesses. Medium and small businesses are not going to be able
Mm-mm.
to absorb any of that cost for any measure of time. So I see small businesses going out of business much quicker, and I see that there will be some consolidation happening in that process. Now, something that we haven't talked about is the consequence of people who are manufacturing equipment for the coffee industry that are getting that equipment manufactured in China and importing the finished product into into the United States, and then getting parts imported for espresso machine technicians, and other equipment technicians. Can we talk about that for a minute? Because we have been contacted about people saying, what happens now with all of that?
Yeah. You're subject to maybe 170% tariffs.
Okay.
There are,
And that's real. Like
yeah,
that's actually a real thing. There is going to be an invoice that shows up for 170%.
yes.
I don't know why I still find that very difficult to believe that that's going to be a real thing. I mean, it sounds like something out of a dystopian novel. Like this couldn't be real. He cannot be serious that businesses can survive this. Okay. You're, I'm
No comment on his
no,
bankruptcies of businesses. That's,
right. I mean, how does it end
no,
any
I meant
other
of
way
his
but that?
own businesses.
Oh, wow. Boom, boom. Okay. I just, I am looking at an economy that's already squeezed and a
Hmm.
consumer that's already squeezed, but then I'm looking at small businesses that have invested a lifetime worth of blood, sweat, and tears and taken out double mortgages. And now, in less than 100 days of his presidency, they're meant to weather something that could put them out of business. Okay, my next question, and we can wrap up this episode on this question. When on what invoices are the tariffs due? So if I have coffee that left Guatemala 2 months ago,
Hmm.
and I have coffee that left Guatemala a week ago, which of those two get the 10% tariffs?
It's when it arrives into the United States. Although
Oh, shit.
there is an on the water exemption,
Hmm.
but that depends on if it meets certain criteria, which is very fact specific.
Okay, so we have to figure out the specifics of the tariff code.
Hmm.
Is it the HST code, HTS code?
Oh, well, that doesn't really matter anymore. It's all 10%.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
no, it matters
Okay.
when it was on a vessel,
Okay.
when it was loaded onto a vessel, and when it arrived. So if it was loaded onto a vessel prior to April 5th at 12:01 a.m. Eastern, then
Hmm.
you may be exempt from the reciprocal tariffs of 10%.
But anything after April 5th,
If
there's the 10% tariff
Right, yeah.
minimum.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if something leaves from China, and is that also the April 5th date is also applicable there, or is it whenever it arrives from China?
There's an April 5th date and an April 9th date for China.
Okay.
And it's also very fact specific, but yes.
Okay.
And it has to make entry before May 27th.
Okay. And what about from Europe? Is that still 10% at this moment?
Yes.
Okay. And at the end of the 90 days, do we know what happens?
We'll find out on Truth Social. It'll be like a 3-day back and forth. I'm sure it'll ruin some vacation of mine. It'll be fine.
Could everyone please get a little more yippy? And maybe if everyone gets a little more yippy, then we will find out a little sooner than expected. Okay. I know that we're joking around a little, folks, but the reason we're joking around a little is because this is really hard to get to be serious about, even though it is such a serious subject. Because,
well, if you can't laugh, you cry, is what I say.
That's 100%. 100% right now. We are recording this a few days before SCA Expo happens, and I can't imagine what's on the other side of Expo and on the other side of this 90-day tariffs. There are just going to be businesses that are they're at the end of their runway, and it's just going to be devastating for our industry. So in the next episode, we're going to talk about what the implications of these tariffs are going to be on businesses that are doing business with the United States. So join us for the next episode, folks. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. I really hope you enjoyed this episode, friends. Please don't forget to show us some love by subscribing, liking, commenting, and most of all, sharing this podcast with your friends. Check the show notes for links, including our sponsors and our Patreon. And stay tuned for more great conversations on the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward.